Actually, we have a good amount of people for it being 1:32, which is awesome. Hey, Ryan.
Hi.
Yeah, so I don't know. Let's not wait. There's already so many people here. Let's just get into it. So we are recording, just so everyone knows, and I'll put it on YouTube. So just so you're aware. And we always start off with introductions because, we try and exceed the presentation format. And this is, we see so many presentations, but we're finally on a call together. We can talk and it's awesome. So I like to start out just doing some quick intros, and we won't do everyone necessarily because there's so many people, but the way I do it now is if you haven't been here in a while and would like to introduce yourself, you can say me in the chat, I guess, and then we can go down the chat line, just so people aren't talking over each other and stuff. And while you guys are doing that, because no one's done it yet, I'll start. My name is Emily, and I work at Level K, and we are working on TCRs for a while, which is when this call started. We're doing a lot more with prediction markets now, and futarchy and building this stuff out on Aragon. But overall, we just love governance and on-chain consensus, and TCR is an awesome example of that. So we're still really into that too. And we'll move on to Michael.
Hi, Mike. I did some early writing on TCRs and then helped launch the AdChain TCR. I'm just getting back from 6 months away from the industry, so I haven't been around. But now I'm back, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing about what the state of the art is in TCRs.
Are you still in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I'm in the consensus office right now. Yep.
Good to see you. And Rich joined, which is awesome. So you can introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Rich. I'm working on a project called HumanityDAO, which is basically a mixture of sort of a DAO and a TCR for unique identity. So the goal is to get a registry or a list of unique humans Ethereum addresses on chain so that we can start to build Sybil resistant smart contract protocols.
Awesome, thanks for joining. I'm sure it would be awesome to discuss HumanityDAO in here one day. And Nick Reynolds.
I think I've missed at least the last 2 meetings, but I'm an engineer and product manager on Civil, so I helped launch our TCR. So we're another live TCR that has some pretty interesting stuff happening.
Oh, muted, sorry. Thanks, Nick, good to see you back. Dan can't make it today. Miss Dan.
Is that everybody on the list? I'll say hi quick as well. I'm
Okay.
Jeff. There's a few new faces I don't know that I've met before. Working on a project called the Common Stack, which is kind of a collaboration between Giveth and Block Science. We're not working on anything specifically TCR related at the moment, but there are a couple of ideas of approaching TCRs from sort of the token engineering, defining these things from mathematical first principles and building these sort of robust crypto economic primitives. So there's some exciting stuff coming out of the Common Stack in the next few months. So just wanted to give that a plug.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else want to introduce themselves anyway, even though they didn't put their name in the chat? I'll leave a couple seconds of awkward silence in case anyone wants to fill that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Fraser Brown. I make most of these if I can. Thanks, Emily, for doing a great job of organizing them, I must say. It's very good. We're about 3 years into building a curation market with 3 full-time developers. We've done something pretty cool recently, which is a system really where experts can curate projects, a bit like a decentralized incubator. And then we integrated that with Uniswap Exchange, which was a lot of fun. so that the project, after it raises its, or after it sells its token, it launches live on Uniswap. So bring on the revolution. Keep going.
Sweet. What was the name of the project you're working on?
It's called Token, with 2 N's, token.com.
Okay, cool. I'm going to put that
If you
in the
want
chat.
the integration with Uniswap, you can go to rinkaby.token.com.
Awesome.
That's about all that's live at the moment. All right.
Thanks, Fraser. And then Alan was going to introduce himself.
Hey, so I'm Alan. I work with Gnosis and on prediction markets. And recently we've been doing some stuff with conditional markets. So that might be useful in TCRs one day, maybe. We'll see. Yeah.
Cool. You'll have to give us the update on that later as it's coming along. Thanks, Alan. All right, last call. Anyone else? Anyone else want to introduce themselves? Okay. Then we're going to move on. It's been about 8 minutes. And so I am going to hand it over to Ryan, but I'll also remind people that you can feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, since we're on a video together and it's a good opportunity to do that. But without further ado, Ryan from Phone.
All right, thanks everyone. I'm really happy to be back on the call and excited to share all the developments that have been happening on the phone map since we last spoke. Okay, everyone can see that? My screen? Yep.
Yes, we can see.
Cool. So a quick agenda of what I want to do for this talk is give an intro to foam for those who don't know, give some context of kind of the problem that we're addressing, go over some new features and tools, and then get into some interesting stories that we've seen happen through different challenges, as well as games that are being built on top and how we plan to improve going forward. So for anyone who doesn't know, at Foam, we're building a consensus-driven map and building geospatial tools for blockchain. So this is everything from encoding standards to ways to visualize smart contract data on a map to proof of location. And our ultimate vision is to do that with a radio-based system. But currently what we have live today is called the Foam map, and it's a token-curated registry for points of interest. And our future product will be on dynamic proof of location, on verifying things that actually move around. But this, like we said, this talk is on the Foam map, which is a community-verified registry of crowdsourced places. The idea is that anybody who has Foam tokens is able to contribute to the Foam map. And anybody then can also verify and check that information. And unlike with OpenStreetMap or Google, there's an incentive to do so. Yeah, so that's that. And so the way that this, what we call static proof of location, static in that what we're verifying shouldn't really move around unless it closes down, is that we're taking this geo and spatial standard we've developed, combining it with the primitive of a token created registry. And out of that, we get a list of points of interest that are verified. So this is like a fun infographic that shows how it works, similar to basic curation market mechanisms, but to add a location, you also need to stake tokens behind that as an anti-spam mechanism and having actually some sort of value backing your information. And if somebody doesn't like that information, they can stake against you and open up a voting period. So everyone should be familiar with that process. But then looking at why are we even doing this? Well, the first place is that we want to bring on-chain geospatial data so that smart contracts don't need to go off-chain to something like Google and pay their API fees. But we also see there are tons of issues and attacks with how it works today. So for example, an attacker renamed New York to anti-Semitic Jewtropolis and some other things in New York that didn't get caught by anyone in OpenStreetMap. And then it didn't get caught by anyone in Mapbox either, that's built on OpenStreetMap. And then Mapbox pushed this update to everything from Snap Maps to the Foam map even, City Bike, Street Easy. And that's a pretty big error to get through. And that was noticed because it's New York City. There's probably tons and tons of errors in OpenStreetMap that nobody's noticed. We've also had people who play Pokemon attacking OpenStreetMaps because if you added a volcano to New York City and it got approved, now you have fire Pokemon all over New York. So it's great for players, not good for other people who build the map. And the current kind of way enterprises are addressing this is what they call protecting the map. And that is essentially to take a closed source version of OpenStreetMap, have enterprises check for errors, and then sell that data back to the users. So they essentially capture the effort of open source cartographers, clean it up, protect it, and then sell it back. And that doesn't really work for smart contracts that want open source data. And probably more noticeable is this report that just came out last week. We're always asked, is this a real problem? Do you have any way to prove it? And there wasn't that much data, but until the Wall Street Journal had just done this expose that shows that there are over 11 million fake points on Google Maps. And not only are there fake points, people are doing that on purpose to kind of game and attack the system. And the way that they do that is that competing businesses will put their business in different towns where their competitors are. And then users get basically all these results that are bogus, and they find out businesses that are in different towns to try to, their competitors are trying to reach them. So in this kind of snapshot of points that come up, we see even the majority are actually fake from Google Maps. So this is a pretty serious problem. It takes over a month to get a new location added to Google Maps, and even could be longer to get a point removed or flagged. So this is just some serious validation for the fact that having a trusted, verified list of points is really an unsolved problem today. So as I said, the phone map has been live since September, and we can see that we're just shy of about 10,000 points that have been added to the map. So it's quite a large token created registry at this point. And because people have to stake tokens when they do this, we found that people are extremely diligent for the most part and are usually concerned that they would be challenged. And so out of this, we see that only about 5% of total points have ever been challenged. And out of that, it's about an 85% success rate. And for the most part, they are legitimate challenges. And we can see also a large percent of about 900 were manually removed. And that could be because the person found themselves there was an error, or they just decided they didn't want to stake their tokens anymore. And this kind of shows the breakdown of points on the map towards what we call proof of use. So in the way that the token sale for Foam operated, we required people to attest to the fact that they were purchasing these tokens for use. But not only do they have to attest that, there's a smart contract that enforces it. So you're not able to trade or transfer your tokens unless you contribute work. And so this blue line shows points on the map that count towards this legal requirement. It's kind of flatlined because there's about 40% of holders that haven't ever used their tokens. But the yellow or orange shows points that don't count towards this requirement, which is now about 60% of the points in the registry. So it really shows us validation in that the incentive mechanisms are working to some extent, that people are using it not just to fulfill proof of use. And we've started to experiment with new kinds of visualization layers. So this shows where points of interest are in the map, and height would represent the amount of tokens they've staked in it. So you kind of get this visualized ranking as well. That's kind of another angle of that. And I'll get to that later. And this one would show points that are interconnected. So if you clicked one, it shows all the other points that were added by that user. And just some kind of visual aids that can help you understand who's using the map, which points are related to another example. So I'm going to switch now to actually showing the map and briefly show some new features that had been added since we probably all last spoke. They're not that crazy, but they added a lot from our experience. So the first is that you have this now notification button on the map, which came out earlier this year. And what that allows you to do is to sign up for notifications. So it's an opt-in system. But we had the issue where you see here, we have a bunch of blue points, and blue means that they are pending. But they've actually been sitting there for a pretty long time. So someone has to manually update the status, or someone needs to design a bot to do that. We're questioning now if this pending period is even needed in terms of smart contracts, and it could be a UI feature. So we have this point that was added in May 15th, and somebody needs to press update status, and maybe that user forgot. So that's why we have now notifications that can let you know. But probably more importantly is that people previously had to kind of manually log into the map and check on their points to see if they've been challenged. So now you don't need to do that. You can get an email notification if your points are challenged. Some other features that we added is a new asset card that shows you all of your points. So this is just a pretty simple redesign, but we got a lot of feedback that the previous asset card was a bit confusing. And so this is where you can manage rewards you may have, what you've approved to be in the registry, and similarly for voting. Let's see. So the next feature that we've added is Uniswap integration directly into the map. So cartographers can acquire foam without basically leaving the system. And so this just directly is a Uniswap widget plugged into the Uniswap API. So that's pretty straightforward. But I'll get into this a little bit later. We actually saw people in different cases buying foam in real time and sending them straight to the map to basically participate. So now if you wanted to do that, you don't need to leave the map. And there's one last feature I wanted to show that is new, and that is also an updated voting card. Let's see if that would work. I need to find a better point, I guess, that shows this better. But we have a new voting card that shows how many people had voted and not voted and what had been revealed and not, so forth. So it essentially helps people understand what's happening with the map a little bit better. We additionally continue to support the Foam Daily Digest. So this is an email service that goes out every day and basically tells you what's happened in the last 24 hours on the map, from new points to challenges, as well as highlights on the map. This is kind of what the notifications look like. So if you signed up for email notifications, you get emails that look like this that tell you if you have an action that you need to return to the map in order to complete. And we've also launched a leaderboard function, which I will just show you. So earlier this year, we launched the Foam Leaderboard. And this is kind of a way to, the first step to bring sort of extra protocol reputation. And this is powered also by 3-box identity. So if you are a user, you can claim a identity, as we can see CryptoZen has, and we know his Twitter profile, etc. And so this lets you see how many points people have added, so it kind of adds a bit competitive spirit, but also who's the most active challenger, voter, and who's won the most. So as we can see, Elvo, who's active in our community, has issued the most challenges ever at 54. This person has never added a point, but they've voted 121 times and initiated 30 challenges. We have this user that has voted quite a bit and has won the most amount of foam. And I'll get to later in the stories, this user has lost the most, was a malicious challenger who essentially was defeated. So this leaderboard is pretty useful, and you can filter then by month and see kind of what's been happening in the map. And we had a lot of amazing feedback on the leaderboard. And so from there, the next thing that we worked on and released is Foam Tools. And so Foam Tools, you can access at foam.tools. It includes the leaderboard, so you can have that under cartographers, but it's essentially a whole new platform for power users. We think of it as a custom Etherscan, or custom block explorer just for the Foam map. So here, if you didn't want to use the map interface, you can basically see all the points that have been added in order this way. And also filter by stake and date and state. And as we can see, some of these users have profiles. And so this guy has a profile. He's also won a badge as the top cartographer of May. You can see he's at the top of the leaderboard. And once this kind of, what I mean by it being a custom Etherscan for Foam is that it filters their on-chain activity, but only related to the Foam map. And so you can really get a sense of reputation behind users to see what they do. So this guy clearly is adding a lot of points, but he's also voting and challenging, etc. Really adding a lot of points. So we're really excited about Foam Tools. Also, it really helps for challenges so that you can see all the challenges underway and also which are in the reveal period. And so when you go to an actual challenge, it has all the information you would find on the map that kind of gives you these kind of graphs and breakdowns and showing who started the challenge. So in this case, the challenger never revealed the vote, which is interesting. Or is this maybe still ongoing? It's still the reveal phase, so they still have time. But in this case, if they had voted to keep the point, they can already very easily determine that they're going to waste gas revealing that transaction. So we're really excited about Foam Tools. We think this is going to be kind of an anchor platform for more analytic services that we're going to build out. And we hear from some users as well that they essentially don't even use the Foam map anymore. They use Foam Tools because they're more power users. So as a next step, we would also make Foam Tools Web3 compatible. So you would be able to vote or add points directly from this platform as well. Yes. So now I want to move on to some stories from the map that have happened that are interesting in the last few months. So one is that, as you saw just on the past cartographer's profile page, we started to experiment with external incentives, and that would be in the form of badges. And so we just started with some simple ones like Top Cartographer of the Month, and we did the first one in April, and you can kind of see an uptick in points there at the top where somebody had really gone for it and added over 200 points. And so that was CryptoZen, who now also has a badge in his profile so that you can get a sense of their reputation. And we're going to build towards a full, robust badge system for all different kinds of things after these tests. So in May, we saw something similar where somebody really went out of their way to get the badge. In that case, it was someone adding churches. And it was this user who we were just looking at who has, I think, added over 300 churches to date, which is very interesting. So the next story is kind of the saga of Meatworks Butchery. Meatworks Butchery is the premier butchery of Ho Chi Minh City. It looks like a great place. And this is a point that had the minimum staked, so only 50 foam, so there's not a huge incentive to go after it and attack it. But this point had survived 7 challenges. So it was challenged 7 times, and each time it survived the challenge. But this was really interesting because, and you can see here on our discourse that this was a pretty intense thread of people discussing Meatworks Butchery. And the reason it was interesting is because here you can see what was the reason for the challenge. I don't like the name. The previous challenge was Meat is Murder. The challenge before that was Cartographer is a Communist. So this was very clearly somebody basically poking at the TCR and just challenging it for the sake of challenging it to see how it would play out. And ultimately, I guess they stopped because the point kept winning. But this kind of just was a great learning experience to see, you know, what happens when the challenger doesn't give up, even though the challenger is wrong and putting fake reasons why they're challenging it. And this is kind of a prelude to the bigger story because the challenger that was attacking Meatworks Butchery for a very low amount of tokens was also kind of initiating maybe upwards of 100 challenges against points with high stakes. So they felt that people shouldn't have staked that much and it's their own fault, so they're going to be challenged. But that challenger also put fake challenge reasons. So they were very sneaky challenges saying, I live in this city, it's actually across the street, trust me, I'll re-add it afterwards. And so this user started to build up a lot of power in the system because they were winning foam every week, challenging points and winning, unlike the Meatworks Butchery one. And the interesting thing that happened was that they essentially challenged the wrong person. I'm not sure if Ainsley's on this call, but Ainsley works for Enigma and also interested in TCRs, and she's an active foam cartographer. And all of her points got challenged. And she had staked about 2,000 in each, and they were all challenged for the full amount. And she basically did a good job of making this post about why all the challenge reasons were kind of bogus and not correct. And a lot of other people joined in as well because, as I said, there was about 35 active challenges at one moment. And so that was kind of the most challenges we've ever seen, but they were all extremely contentious and potentially false outright. And what happened from there was really interesting because after 3 weeks of challenges and the cartographers not being able to defend themselves, was that people started to self-organize and basically set up these chat groups and start to spread the word. And so this graphic shows the amount of foam that was staked in the voting contract. You can see from September to December, not really that much. After December is when the foam system became unlocked. So if you completed proof of use, you would be able to trade. And we see starting in February, March, April, more tokens getting added. That might have even been the challenger growing power and depositing more and more. But here we see is when kind of there was the breaking point in the community where people were writing at length why this challenger needs to be stopped. And then we saw something really wild where the token contract went up a pretty significant amount. A big chunk of it is one address that held a lot, but even without that address, it went from 400,000 to about 3 million in a few days. And we saw even the challenger buying more tokens on exchanges and depositing it, as well as users removing their own points to get tokens to put into the voting contract. And I think that really large voter only voted on about 2. So even without that large holder, the challenger was ultimately defeated. And as I said, Foam Tools is really exciting. So you can then go and see a bunch of those points that were talked about. And basically, this point is still on the map. The challenge against it had failed, so they actually won tokens from even surviving. And you can then like dig a bit deeper and see how much was that challenge for historically and who had participated in it. As you can see, quite a lot. And probably similar to one of those other points as well. This was just a restaurant in San Francisco, but with the Foam Tools now, you don't really need to dig through Etherscan. You get this kind of custom way to see how people are using it, and then you can potentially, judge their reputation off of that.
What chat software did the Foam users use to rally and try and collaborate to defeat this guy?
So our community is on Discourse,
okay,
which is like a message board, and that's where people were posting like at length. Okay. I believe that people might have DM'd each other and taken it off Discourse from there. But one feature we want to add as well is the 3-box threads in chat. So you could potentially, in a Web3 fashion, directly have a line of communication with the challenger or the voters. Yeah. So this slide shows challenger speed on the Foam map. And so the majority of challenges are when a point is even less than a week old. So that kind of is a positive statistic because it's showing that the curators are really active looking at what's newly added and investigating it. And then we see, though, that the rest of the challenges are points that are at least 7 weeks old. And we've spoken to, I will say, benevolent challengers that care a lot about the quality of data. And we've learned from these malicious challengers, and their tactics are to kind of scour the map for really old points that might have like a lot of foam in them and have some sort of error. So we have this kind of backlog of people looking for, gold essentially, and then people who are like filtering the brand new points. And the points that are in between seem to be ignored. And this kind of shows, as everybody knows, the frustrations around partial lock voting, that you need to return to reveal your vote manually. And this kind of shows voters that didn't reveal versus reveal. And more towards the left, there's a lot more that didn't reveal. And that probably speaks to the fact that the notification system wasn't live. So you had people committing and then not being able to reveal. And with the notification system and the Foam tools, we kind of see that the reveal statistics are a lot higher. And then when you actually investigate the unrevealed, a lot of the times it's the challenger who realizes they lost and they don't want to waste a gas revealing their vote. So that's kind of validation that these external tools that we've provided to users are definitely aiding their interactions with the protocol. So those were kind of some exciting stories from the last few months. On the other side, we've been experimenting with external incentives through games. And so like one of the first one was around NFTs so that you can win an NFT if you participate in the map. So we had this event at our headquarters in New Lab with companies like MakerDAO and LifeFear. And it was a special promotion where if you mapped the neighborhood where the event was during a 24-hour period, you could be eligible for this NFT. And there's kind of a GIF here showing that that neighborhood was kind of empty. And like within 24 hours, we got 50 plus points just for this external incentive. So that was quite interesting. And from there, we did a bit more full-fledged games. So we had a partnership with a project called Block Cities. They're focused on amazingly graphic designed architecture that are collectibles. And so for this, basically, there were all these historic buildings, for example, Moscow Planetarium or Alan Turing's birthplace. And each day, there would be a building available for a winner. And clues would be posted on Twitter about what the building may be. And to win the NFT, you need to add the Foam POI to the map. And then you can the first person to do that would win one of these NFTs. And it's a really interesting game for a token creator registry, because if you play the game and lose by guessing the wrong point, you still add a valid point to the map. So for each one, we had 50 to 100 points get added to the map, and a bunch of them were correct points, but not the ones that won the map. And then we also got a lot of duplicates because people were in the same block or 2 blocks away solving it at the exact same time. So this is an example of what it would look like on Twitter, where we would be announcing the rules and the results each day. And that was like a holiday-themed event. It was really successful. We had people doing some wacky stuff to make sure they could win, which I can get into in the questions. But more recently, during Blockchain Week, we did a new version of the scavenger hunt. And this one was once a week, and then all during Blockchain Week. And it was based in New York City. Similar rules with the clues going out on Twitter. Those are some of the results. But what was different about this one is that we also worked with an engineer from Microsoft. He had previously won about 50% of the treasure hunt the first time. So he really enjoyed it. And instead of, I guess, still competing, he decided to contribute efforts. And so with this scavenger hunt, there was we took advantage of the Microsoft Azure Ethereum tools. And there was basically an Ethereum logic app bot running in the cloud. And this bot would listen to the Foam API and see if the correct point was added within a certain geofence. And it would also automatically tweet the clues out. Some of the code, or this is more of the flow. And so the treasure hunt was automated in that if the point was correctly added, this bot would automatically announce that the competition was over and then also mint out the NFT to the user. So this was a really exciting integration of seeing how our API can be used and how other developers can hook into the TCR to trigger other kinds of events. So that was an exciting game, and we had a lot of positive feedback. And it's cool to see people in real time going to Uniswap, buying foam, and sending it straight to the registry, trying to compete for this game. And we saw a lot of that, and it brought in people who hadn't used the map before. And this kind of shows the breakdown of POIs as per tag. And you can see at the bottom that these games having some material effect on points getting added. So we're still interested in doing more test games and supporting different ones that have an externality effect of more work getting added to the map. And so through these stories of like potentially malicious challengers, reputation, Sybil attack, there's been a lot of conversations started through our community on what are KPIs, if we wanted to change a parameter. Is 50 tokens a good minimum? Things like that. But we also have an upgrade path in the registry, so it would be possible to launch a TCR 2.0. And so there's a lot of discussions that have been happening. These calls are ongoing, so if you're interested in participating, I invite you to join. The most recent one happened about last week or so, and this one was focused on smart contract changes. And so there was a lot of good discussion on, how can we give the point owner more of an advantage? How can we make it more difficult to be a malicious challenger? And there are different ideas around having different challenge power. So if you want to be able to challenge at the max amount, you need to be at some certain percentile of having contributed work to the system. And different ideas like this for defender's advantage and things. So these are all in the works in terms of like speaking about them and specifications. And we're interested in having those come through the foam improvement proposal process and have them be actually specified, and supporting anybody who wants to take a stab at different sets of contracts. And with that, as we've seen these external tools be built by other people, not just from our team and games, last month we announced the foam grant program, and we're interested in supporting things like maps, new toolings, or even test smart contracts for a new kind of TCR. So for anybody on this call who would be interested in that, let me know. That would be great. And thank you. That's all I have for today, but happy to keep the conversation going.
Sweet. So much stuff. So we still have a good amount of time. So does anyone have a question that they're just burning to ask?
I have a question. Hi, Ryan. Thank you for the presentation. It sounds like you guys are doing really, really well.
Yeah, thanks.
So happy to hear. I just have a few random questions. So you guys haven't done an upgrade yet. You're still running the same TCR that you launched with?
Yeah, the only upgrades are like these buttons and enhancements and back-end things. But
Sure. And have there been any changes or even any proposals to change registry parameters? Has anyone ever even made a proposal to change a parameter?
In the notes, there are like been discussions, but it essentially came to the point where we figured we need these like KPIs. So there is a grant proposal already to make like a KPI dashboard, because one of the issues was that with this malicious challenger, they were challenging points that voluntarily staked above the minimum. And so, is this really a problem if all the points were at the minimum and things like that? So we haven't, the governance contracts are live, so technically anybody can call them, but we are, within a month or so, we'll launch like an official dashboard for that.
Cool. And so in the challenges that you've seen, like roughly what percentage of the total token supply participates in the challenges, or at least in the circulating supply?
I have a different statistic, which is like 85% pass. I would say it ranges between 2 to 50 users voting. And then it varies widely per vote on how many tokens they use. But the most tokens that have ever been in the voting contract was 8 million.
And that's out of a billion token supply?
300 million are circulating.
Oh, okay, cool, sweet.
And about 50 million are staked in the map. Majority in the signal contracts, which is not the TCR.
And I guess my last question, maybe I'll think of others, but so currently it's 50 foam, which is like $2 to stake something. Is that right?
Yeah, around that.
And I mean, that just seems so low, but you don't identify that as having been like a problem. Have you thought about, is that going to go up that amount?
I think that we discussed this one of the last times we met, in that there's like a slightly different philosophy where I think with AdChain, the idea was it would like become more and more expensive to be on the list as it becomes more prestigious, where I anticipate that the minimum stake would trend towards 1 over time, especially if the token value went up. But we definitely are cognizant of like people in other countries where $2 might cost them a lot more money. And that if you have some sort of equilibrium where at least the total value backing this map has some sort of correlation to the legitimacy of it.
And in foam, it is the case that I can choose to stake more and then it costs more to challenge me. Is that the case in
you
foam?
would still be able to challenge the minimum, but then
okay.
Like you staked 1,000, I challenge you for 50, only 50 of your tokens are at risk. So you technically could withdraw 950 and vote to defend your own point.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, we had, and then out of those 35 malicious challenges, one of them was for 20,000 foam, which I think is a lot more than $2. And they lost that one as well. So the point then so the guy who like won the most money that month never voted, never challenged. He just survived the challenge.
How big is the foam team now?
We're about 12 people.
Cool. And you're having fun?
Yeah, we're excited to see how this has developed. Definitely a surprise that it is going well in that sense. And we're excited to support these grant proposals to get more built on the map.
For 12 people, you guys are getting a lot done.
Thanks. We're primarily focused on the radios right now.
Oh, wow.
Hey, I have something that relates to Mike's question about voter participation. And I think I've actually potentially brought it up with you on Twitter before, but I'm really interested in vote delegation. And one of the nice things about vote delegation is that it can be added without having to upgrade the TCR because it plays nicely with the PLCR already. I hadn't been able to find what I would consider to be like a minimum viable delegate contract from my rudimentary Googling. So I spent like an hour and created one. I just linked it in the chat. I think it works. It's not unit tested and it's definitely not audited, but it does allow you to put tokens toward a delegate. They get to vote with everyone's tokens. The delegate owner gets all the rewards. But I really think that it could go a long way in terms of increasing token voter participation, far above the like 1% that most blockchain governance projects are seeing. Like personally, as a foam token holder, I don't spend a lot of time voting. Don't have the time for it, but
yeah, I mean, especially since it wouldn't require the actual registry contracts to change, it's definitely, I think, something people would. I think people have actually requested it. Actually, people were requesting us to loan them tokens so they could vote. But send me any links or documents. Happy to think a bit more about it.
sure.
It's in the chat already.
Yeah, it's really simple. It's like 80 lines of code, and it's not really tested that well, but it does function.
Anyone have any other questions?
I guess I just have a comment. I think you said like maybe people are forgetting to like submit their applications when they're like, you know, after the time's up and they haven't been challenged. I know that when we were doing our version of a TCR, kind of writing a different one, it just kind of looks at the date. Like no one needed to trigger it to be on, but after it's been sitting there for a certain date, the unchallenged just flips to on. So we found that useful.
Yeah, we have a proposal to take out pending as even a parameter of the TCR and have it be only like a UX feature, so that like the front end like filters points by color, but it like removes any smart contract logic of needing to update status. Which might be true in our case, since we see that so many new points do get challenged anyway, so people are just looking at new points, not necessarily filtering by pending or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were thinking along those lines.
And so it also removes a step for users to have to come back once they did the work.
Have you guys thought at all about, I've thought about this and never really made any progress, but how to move at least some processes of token curated registries off chain? I mean, maybe into state channels, theoretically in the far future into something like Plasma, though it seems like we're a long way from being able to support anything like a TCR in Plasma. But have you guys thought at all about how TCRs or parts of their processes might move off chain or into layer 2?
Not so much like layer 2 specific, because like we are working with Plasma implementation for the proof of location right now with Tendermint, and it's definitely a challenge to even do that. But we are kind of thinking more about what we've seen a large complaint is like the immutability issue. So like we had a lot of nitpicky challenges being like, you didn't add the phone number. And it's like, well, that's not a required field, right? Because if you added a bench, it's still a valid point. And so then we removed those parameters. So if you didn't add a phone number, it wouldn't like show up like it's missing a phone number, because we had like people challenging for that. But because all the metadata is on IPFS, you can't really change it without deleting the point. So we thought a bit more about like, this also would not require new smart contracts, but using ENS or IPNS. That's more like a pinning, so that you would be able to control updates yourself.
Yeah, I had thought about using IPNS, like in the extra data field, and then you would have like a metadata blob that you
exactly
the owner control. Yeah, I think that would be wise.
So that's something that can happen without a smart contract update. I think that a lot of people want to see smart contract updates, but underestimate the not only difficulty in writing them, but then even for us, we had to delay our launch because audits take time and everything. And so for us, it would make a lot more sense to emphasize a TCR 2.0 once there are external services that depend on it. But right now, we're actually pretty impressed with how the mechanisms are playing out. But so for more on layer 2, I don't, it's not the same as like Plasma, but having more metadata, more immutable, and more ways that you can, maintain your point without spending gas.
Hey, Ryan, I want to say that was really neat. And also a comment on the previous question. I just want to ask, like, if you were thinking about switching to something that uses named service, if there are like security implications that you've thought through, like for example, changing the metadata to point to potentially malicious metadata that can have users call bad numbers or something?
Yeah, we haven't fully investigated it, and as is, the IPFS setup is not ideal because we have to run a pinning service to ensure that the data gets there. Same for 3box, so you're ultimately depending on a centralized service to get your metadata out there. So it's already not working that great in that sense. I need to look more into what controls using a pinning service would give other users to mess with the data. I'm not sure how it works that well.
Oh, I meant for the owner of the domain or the name and IPNS. If a name owner registers something with valid metadata, but then after the challenge period is over, then decides, well, I guess the point is you could challenge again, I guess.
You could also just handle that on the UI side by saying oh, whenever the metadata changes, let's display this POI a little bit differently so that people know to check it again because it's changed recently.
That's a good idea.
But we're definitely open to discussing with anyone interested in specifying how that could work.
Does anyone else have any more questions?
I have some HumanityDAO questions. We have a team member on the
Awesome.
call.
Yeah. So I put at the end of the call that we can just kind of do ad hoc project updates. So I guess I'll wrap it up with phone. That was an amazing presentation.
Thanks everybody for your attention and feedback.
Yeah. The leaderboard's awesome. I feel even on GitHub, if I notice my green squares aren't coming in, I'm like, oh man, I gotta get this committed today. So gamification actually definitely even gets me to work harder. So yeah, I'll have to check out the foam TCR now. Cool. So let's segue into ad hoc project updates. And I know Mike has questions about HumanityDAO. Hopefully Rich is still on the call.
Yeah, maybe Rich could just
he's here.
give an update. Yeah.
Maybe he.
Sorry, you guys dropped out for a second. What was the question?
Just an update. Or to Rich, if he's still paying attention.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So the update is we have about 600 humans now. We're starting to build the first civil resistance smart contract protocols. So one sort of contentious issue in the Ethereum community today is how to deal with Libra. So we're going to host a democratic vote on whether humanity should participate in a Libra DAO. Some other stuff we're working on, there's a new project called Enable Credit, which is building unsecured loans. So we're gonna, the first borrower in that ecosystem is going to join Humanity and build sort of reputation. So we'll see if she repays the loan. That's about it.
Hey, Rich, quick question for you. When you say a democratic vote on whether to join Libra, is that a one person, one vote?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
In the HumanityDAO application process is pretty much the only material that voters have to go on the applicant's Twitter profile, or have you added anything else to what sort of application material is available to curators? And how effective has that been? Has anyone remained in the registry for a while who you discovered was not a real human?
Yeah, so for now it's just Twitter. We've seen about 20 accounts disappear or delete their Twitter accounts after they get into the registry, which is sort of a clear signal that they're Sybil accounts. But 20 out of 600 isn't too bad. We plan to add additional verification methods in the future, so stuff like GitHub, Facebook, other sort of social profiles. But we're focusing on Twitter because that's sort of where the crypto community congregates for now.
And I have another question. This might be too big a question for like the last 9 minutes of this call, so feel free to, punt it. I can contact you later. But I know that you guys wrote a whole new TCR. You guys use a totally different TCR implementation than foam or ad chain. I haven't like read the code base yet, but can you describe at a high level what the major differences are in your TCR relative to previous ones?
Yeah, so we optimized for simplicity. So we got rid of commit reveal just because it's an extra transaction. We also got rid of sort of staking. So basically, once you stake, if you get in to the registry, you get your stake back. So that gets rid of the issue that foam is seeing with, malicious challenges. Basically, if you get into the registry, you get your stake back. If you don't get into the registry, then you lose your stake. So the entire protocol is actually about 400 lines of code. So it's very, very simple. Yeah, take a look at it. You would understand it.
Cool, thanks.
And if you get in, but that was the wrong thing, what's the incentive to being removed, or can you just not be removed once you're on?
You can be removed. So we haven't built the UI for it yet. But yeah, we do have essentially free rider problems where no one is incentivized to vote and no one is incentivized to challenge someone. So we're still working around that.
I just want to say, I think the UBI idea was like a very funny and good gimmick to get people psyched about it. $1 a month it's very cool.
Yeah. So I think like another insight that we had was that TCRs are really useful when the list can be used in the context of a smart contract protocol. So basically a list of humans is good in that it's a gateway to, this sort of new class of smart contract protocols. So UBI is basically a 50-line smart contract that is impossible without this registry.
It'd be cool if you come on 1 month and give us the whole rundown, the contract, how it works, the UBI, your future plans.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be fun. I could definitely do like a code walkthrough.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. I think this call shouldn't shy away from doing code walkthroughs. So.
Does anyone else on the call work on a TCR that could give us an update?
Dan from, I'm not Dan, I'm Nick from Civil.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the last update you all received was. Not a ton has changed in terms of the product. I'll share a link in the chat real quick to our registry homepage. We operate at like a pretty different scale than something like Foam. We have very, very few listings and a much higher deposit. And that's so right now we have about 45-ish approved newsrooms. We've had, I believe, 5 challenges. I think they all resulted in the newsrooms being removed. 6 challenges, it looks like, actually. And we've even, for those of you that don't know, we have a special process. We have like an appeal process and an appeal challenge process. So if someone disagrees with the initial challenge results, they can kind of send it up to a body of journalism experts that's called our council, who can judge it themselves, and then that can in turn be challenged by the community again to overturn their decision. And we've actually seen some interesting stuff with our council decisions. They've been really, really informative and have helped people figure out the way that they want to vote on future challenges because they see the reasoning behind this like group of experts decisions. We're working on some new things that we'll be happy to share with probably on the next call, that basically ways to help the newsrooms that are on the registry make more money and survive as newsrooms. And aside from helping them hopefully incentivize more newsrooms to join because it unlocks access to some of these tools that we're building.
Yeah, Emily, I can jump in with a bit about, I think I noticed the evolution here. It used to be curation markets and then became very much centered around TCRs. But our idea of a curation market is actually quite fundamentally different. I mean, you could call it like a by constituency curation. So we noticed that a lot of things that where curation can apply have two different groups of people. A good example is what Rich mentioned there, what is probably a small loan, unsecured. So in our world, the curators kind of vet the loan application. Then there's a result of what all the curators decided about that loan application. And then there's the result of the loan application being crowdfunded. So you have these sort of crowdfunded by different people and the curators. So we use this sequence to create reputation for curators, and then the next step to allocate reward to curators. I think the next thing we're going to tackle is a press play, a media play, and it'll be interesting with Civil to, once we get that to some sort of point of readiness, to see if it could become a really decentralized newsroom.
Awesome. Yeah.
Definitely reach out to me about that. I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, will do.
Yeah, there's like shortly after we started doing the TCR call, another call started that is more generally about curation markets, but I know that they remain more general. We remain a little more targeted towards TCR. A lot of people get them confused.
Does Simon do the curation markets call?
It's run by Linen Labs mostly. Yeah, it's by Devin and Paul, I think, facilitate it. And then, yeah, they talk about that in the Gitter channel. Yeah, we're at about time. Thank you, everyone, so much for participating. Thank you so much, Ryan, for preparing the presentation.
Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everyone, for your questions and being conversational. That's totally the point. I'll see you guys next month. If you want to talk about something specific, drop it in Telegram, etc. Yeah, don't be afraid to use Telegram. Sweet. See you guys. Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jeff. Bye, Jeff. Bye.
Yeah.